Hey everybody, welcome to Member When. We're talking about Solo today, a Star Wars story. I'm joined by my friend Roger from Detroit Sports Radio. They've got some great podcasts, great shows on there. How you doing, Roger?
Good, and just sportsradiodetroit.com.
What did I say?
Oh, you said Detroit Sports Radio.
SportsRadioDetroit.com.
No worries, no worries. Doing good, Mark. Got to experience a really good special Monday afternoon matinee, if you will.
Right? Yeah, so we saw Solo, a Star Wars story, which has not been doing great at the box office so far, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great, fun adventure movie. What did you think, Roger?
I thought the same thing. We talked about this before the show that we didn't have expectations, and this movie exceeded my expectations of zero expectations. But it's a really good family movie. If you got kids at home, it wasn't too out of the ordinary violent. Kind of a PG-13 feel to it, but it had some classic elements of like classic Star Wars, like good versus evil, but it had enough of a origin story where it didn't. You knew who Solo was, you knew who Han was, but did you know how he became Solo? And they get too involved someone like the Marvel characters, which gets deeper and deeper. But it was a good, maybe like a shot full of Star Wars, But the rest of it, if you didn't think Star Wars, was just a good adventure movie.
Yeah. I didn't look at it so much as an origin story. I mean, once we started watching it, it didn't seem so much necessarily like an origin story. You're not going to learn all about Han Solo's complete backstory. It's kind of more of like, here's an adventure that Han Solo went through before we saw him in A New Hope. And I liked that it kind of had a Western motif to it. And it was like a sci-fi Western blend. Especially the way they lit a lot of the shots. A lot of it was backlit. Shot from low perspective up, so everything looks really big. Kind of reminiscent of a lot of the like Sergio Leone spaghetti westerns, but obviously with a sci-fi bent to it. And it's a heist movie. It's a movie about a heist, and it's like classic Western bones to the story, and I thought it was very satisfying. From beginning to end, it had a lot of adventure. I connected with a lot of the characters. I thought a lot of the characters were great. Alden Ehrenreich didn't. He's not exactly Harrison Ford, but you're not going to find exactly Harrison Ford. If you come in hoping to see a like a Harrison Ford impersonation, then you're not going to get that. But I think he embodied the spirit of Han Solo really well. I think he had a lot of charisma, a lot of charm, and that arrogance. And I think he really embodied it. And Donald Glover, I thought was great as Lando. He's not in a ton of the movie, but I think he also did really well as far as embodying Billy D. Williams' character.
He does. He even sounds like him in certain parts of the movie, where even the beginning where you see him first play him in Sarek, which is the card game that, for you Star Wars fans out there, you die-hard Star Wars fans, may have played it in Knights of the Old Republic, which is the old Xbox role-playing game. So, but getting back to what you talked about, the Western theme, that's a good analogy to put it, Mark. In terms of even like the almost odds against the wall, kind of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, where they're always on the run kind of aspect to it. And then a little bit of the good, the bad, and ugly. But what I thoroughly enjoyed about this movie, about I mentioned earlier about the surface thing about Han Solo, was the Empire finally kind of getting this propaganda. You see it when he's about to take off without his companion. I forget her name at the top of my head right now. Kira. And you see join the Empire, and like you see the Empire like guard like kind of sitting there with the prideful look, which has that kind of a World War II to it. I love that part because I think that is an element of these Star Wars movies that is missing, because you always know the Empire is bad, but then you see it kind of like their propaganda machine going out, and then what the scene that I really loved the most is when Han starts storming through what looked like a World War II, battle where there's just guns, it's just blasters instead, which is a little different of an element, but you get a sense, them trying to, conquer planets, them trying to really change them and make it into their own will. So getting a feel for that really helped. And I really like the element of the Imperial Army because the Imperial Army and the Imperials as a whole, you always see them as clean and just kind of like this. But the mud, the dirt, the foot soldiers, what they're doing, that I really like that element of it. It made it seem more surreal and a little more realistic. And wasn't I don't know about you, Mark? Did you get the? I didn't get the heavy CGI vibe to it.
No. A lot of things seemed really practical. It seemed like they were outside filming in the elements, which really makes a difference. And like you said, in the original trilogy, we didn't see a whole lot of battles on the ground, I suppose, except for in Return of the Jedi in Endor, which was with the Ewoks, so it was a little different. And then in the prequel era, you get some more battles, but it's all CGI against backgrounds, and it feels more sterile. Here, I agree with what you're saying. Those parts felt almost like a World War II, era movie, where it's the first time that we really get like a human connection with the struggle on the ground with the Empire against indigenous species in like a realistic, there's explosions going around, it's total chaos, and that seeing that aspect of their battle adds like a different element, I think, to the Empire. So I guess we'll get into spoilers a little bit now, so tune out if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want it completely ruined for you. So I wanted to know, one of my favorite things, there's a couple twists in here. Obviously, there's some backstabbing. Star Wars has a rich tradition of people betraying other people. But towards the end, and actually, I noted this earlier. Dryden Voss, that's Paul Bettany's character, kind of the main villain of the movie. He mentions that he's working for someone that he can't let when they don't successfully pull off the heist at the first part with the train. He mentions to Woody Harrelson's character that he works for someone and that he can't just let him go. There has to be consequences. So I was thinking the whole time, who is he working for? And when Kira kills Dryden Voss at the end of the movie, she contacts their, leader, and it turns out to be Darth Maul. And I thought, I did not see that coming. It's one of those things where I hadn't heard any whispers about it or anything, so I completely didn't see it coming. And I know Roger goes a little more deep cuts than I do on some of the Star Wars stuff, but I do know the story from, I haven't watched a lot of the Clone Wars TV show or the Rebels TV show, but I know that that he comes back there with the robot leg enhancements. So what did you think about having Darth Maul appear?
I was very, very happy with that, and I think that the way they did it was very subtle. And again, I avoid the internet when it comes to a movie when it comes out. For example, when I saw the Star Trek with Khan, the redoing of Khan, I didn't know it was coming firsthand, and I was pleasantly surprised with that. But I like this, and it kind of fits in with the Star Wars canon. Now the books and all that have erased because Disney's like, well, screw it, we'll just start all over, which is unfortunate because in the books, Prince Isidore, who was in the video game for, I think it's Shadows of the Empire, which came out for N64 in 97, 98, whatever that was, he was a leader of a kind of a gang. There was a Dark Sun. Some of the books that Luke fights these guys off in the novels, too. So it kind of fits into their new version of it, if you will. And Darth Maul is a perfect character because I always thought that George Lucas' biggest mistake was wasting the hype for a guy who comes out in a badass dual lightsaber, is the apprentice for essentially the Emperor, and was this guy who was the original apprentice. And they kind of like, well, this is, who are gonna have the original? Who are we going to replace Darth Maul with? Oh,
A 90-year-old man.
yeah, and like over, like we're gonna have Anakin, and that's what it ties into. But they wasted him, and unlike Boba Fett, which I think the older I get, the more I realize Boba Fett is, and hopefully they'll get re-image him a little bit because in reality, in the books and in the canon, he's better. In the movies, he's not well represented. He gets destroyed pretty easily by Mace Windu. Mm-hmm. He's kind of a little bit overblown as a badass. But Darth Maul, they took his legacy, like, no, we're going to make him more of a badass. And they did a good job. I thought the lightsaber towards the end when he talking to her was kind of unnecessary. Like, dude, we already know you have a lightsaber. Or like, what fear you're going to impose if you're in holographic, what's going to turn on your lightsaber. Is that supposed to be imposing? No, it's not. So that was a part of like, that's a little unnecessary. But it was good to see him back, and good to see how I'm intrigued that hopefully they take something with this. And they're probably going to make movies with this, and they should, because I don't think box office numbers should just indicate that. I think you still have the Marvel hangover, I like to call it right now.
Right.
It's Memorial Day weekend. I think the more this is a movie where people were kind of going, we'll take a wait and see approach with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that as the movie gets a good reputation, as it should, then more people. I hope that more people see this.
Yeah, I think this one is going to be a slow build. I know there's some backlash for Kathleen Kennedy, who runs Lucasfilms for Disney. I'd heard before that there was talk of like kind of protest against her. I don't know how much that played into the box office or not. I can't imagine. Fan protests don't ever really seem to get coalesced. That's a hard thing to do. Because I know a lot of people are upset about The Last Jedi, but we won't, totally go into The Last Jedi here.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as this movie goes, I think you're right. I think this is going to be kind of a slow build, almost like movies used to be in the late 70s or 80s, where they'd stay in the theater for 6 months or a year. I think E.T. was in the theaters for about 2 years.
Wow.
I think that this will kind of be like a slow build. I'm sure they'll do well, for the Blu-ray release and everything like that. I'm sure they'll still make money on this movie. But yeah, I think people will start to come around, and I think a lot of people didn't have a ton of expectations for it, which, it's good to go into a movie without enormous expectations. I think a lot of times people expect too much of Star Wars and what Star Wars is. But yeah, I thought it was really enjoyable, and I think it will get recognition as time goes on and people cool.
I think with the one thing you talked about, Kathleen Kennedy being the head of Disney, and I think this part will stoke the fires of the fanboys, is when the pirate leader is revealed as a woman, and they're just it's gonna just go, well, here we go again, just important encouragement of the women, blah blah blah. And look, here's the thing, real quick, I don't want to go into Last Jedi too much because I could definitely go on a rant about that. I have friends of mine saying, did you feel this was a female propaganda type movie? And I don't, maybe because I don't think that way, or I don't, my whole thing is if it's a good movie, man, woman, dog, puppet, whatever the case is, if it's a good movie, it's a good story, it doesn't matter to me. I kind of smirked at that because when I saw that, I was thinking about what people were going to say about that. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I think that, like, even with, we go to the Ghostbusters, the Last Call, or the new...
Answer the Call?
Answer the Call, and all these fanboys getting upset, and all these like, dude, people just... Why? Why? Is it because it's not like your childhood? It's not like when you had Frosted Flakes when you were a kid, and it doesn't taste the same... when you have a cheeseburger, whatever the case, pop narrative you have. I think the way this movie is laid out with the character development, and the same thing with the Star Wars movie in between the movies.
Rogue One?
Rogue One, same thing. People bitched about that too a little bit.
Yeah, and it's the same, like when... before The Force Awakens, and they revealed the Finn with black stormtrooper. We can't have a black stormtrooper. Yeah. I mean, that was crazy. I feel the same way as you. I didn't love The Last Jedi, But I have like very specific reasons why I didn't like. I didn't like a lot of the humor didn't work for me, and I'm not gonna go into a ton of Last Jedi, but like I had pacing issues and stuff like that with the movie, but none of it. When I started reading about the purple haired, and like feminism and all this stuff, I'm like, I remember thinking like, what? Like, do we watch the same? That didn't strike me as like a feminist thing. And like, some people will point to the female robot in this movie, I'm sure. Wanting to liberate other robots. People are gonna be like, oh, there's an SJW, robot and stuff.
It's an Easter egg.
I can hear it now, and it's like you. I don't. When I go into movies, I kind of hate how every movie becomes political now.
Yeah.
It really drives me nuts.
And you know what? If you look at that, so let's if you talk about it was D3, right? D3 was it the D3 robot? That character had an emotional tie to Lionel Calrissian, and the thing about that character is that he made that robot. So if you have a problem with the way he made female, then go talk to the Childish Gambino or Donald Glover,
Right.
or Donald Glover, if you will. Either identity will work. But in all seriousness, I didn't think anything about her being a female robot. She had her own mind. Like, I think the one thing about these movies they're trying to do with the droids in general, and it goes back to Rogue One, is these droids have a mind of their own, and the robots are not going to. And this happened even in the books too, a little bit too. The narrative of droids just being what have you, and even in the days of now with artificial intelligence, it makes sense. I mean, if you're gonna have the robot going, I am, or like R2D2 kind of stiff, or 3CPO, R2D2 was a rebellious robot, but you couldn't understand him because it's all beep bop beeps. So this falls into that same Star Wars narrative, but it just happens to have a female voice. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, free feminism, blah, blah. No. I thought the robot characters, I don't know who played her voice.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Whoever did a fantastic job, and the story arc fits the Star Wars narrative anyways of R2-D2. He would have done the same thing.
Yep.
He would have freed somebody, caused distraction, it made sense. So
what I think was kind of fun about it too is that she dies in the rebellion that she starts, and they plug her into the Millennium Falcon, and it's a small thing, but it kind of adds something to me for the original trilogy. Like, I think it's in The Empire Strikes Back when C-3PO is trying to talk to the Millennium Falcon and says like, I don't know where your robot learned dialect, and it kind of adds something. So it's like he's talking to that. That's who he's talking to. So we kind of get that connection too. But yeah, as far as the politics go, I think there are some films that are political. Obviously,
right.
There are some films with a clear political bent, but these are fun space opera adventure movies, and I really don't think. Yeah, behind the scenes they want to be a little more inclusive as far as giving roles to minorities and and women and everything like that, which is fine. But I don't see politics being infused into the Star Wars universe, really. Not in story wise.
Not to mention, I mean, we talk about it doesn't change the story that much because it's space. What, you're supposed to think that's all like some sort of one race is out there in space? Like,
right.
It's ridiculous. And so, but getting back to the movie, getting back to what Ron Howard did. Ron Howard took over midway through the movie, directing this movie because the original director, I think, was from Baby Driver.
Lord and Miller.
Yeah, Lord and Miller.
Yeah. They did the Lego movie and some other animated films, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, I think.
Okay, so I don't know what direction he was trying to take the movie in, but Ron Howard did a really good job. And Ron Howard is a seasoned vet, but he gets Star Wars. And I thought, for a guy who's never been in Star Wars, who's done his own thing, going back to, you look at movies he's done, his time with Arrested Development as a narrator. Talk about the Fire movie I'm trying to think of with Billy Baldwin.
Backdraft.
Yep. Ron Howard movies have a distinctive Ron Howard feel to this. It didn't feel like a Ron Howard film to it. Ron Howard did a really good job of taking Star Wars and going, all right, I understand it. I'm gonna take my own spin take on it, and he did a good job. He did a good job of making the characters not only likable, but just adding the element of that Star Wars motif to it. But also, as Star Wars, as classic Star Wars, history repeats itself. You always catch that in every movie. You know who shoots first,
Right.
and then of course the ever popular understanding Chewbacca and his the Wookiee dialogue. But then what was the other thing? The his one those phrases about luck.
Yeah.
Same thing. History is like, well, yeah, he's nodding to knowing Han pretty well.
Yeah, I wrote down early. He grows up on
Brilliant.
Corellia, and he's indebted to this Proxima that kind of controls all the kids. And as he's going there, he says, I was just on the way to see her, just like he says with Jabba the Hutt. But I know Ron Howard is good friends with George Lucas. He was in American Graffiti, that George Lucas directed in the 70s, and Harrison Ford was in that movie too. So I know he has at least some familiarity. When George Lucas still owned Lucasfilms, I know he wanted Ron Howard to. He approached Ron Howard about possibly directing Return of the Jedi, but it was very early in his career, and Ron Howard wasn't sure that he was ready for something like that. And that's, he did Willow, which George Lucas produced afterwards, and that was kind of his, indoctrination. But I know he's good friends with him, so I know he has a familiarity with the universe and characters. And like you said, I think he did a very good job of coming into a really hard situation where Lord and Miller had done about 80% of the film, and they just didn't they thought it was too jokey. They didn't think it was serious enough or had the right tone, and I think he came into a really tough situation and did more than I think anyone could expect as far as reshooting and putting together this film. I think he did an excellent job, and he's a fantastic director. So I think I think they really succeeded there.
No, I agree. And the one thing about this movie that really stood out to me as well was the humor was subtle. It wasn't over the top, but also I thought the action sequences, in terms like we talked about earlier, were good. But another element of the show or the movie that I really liked as well was the addition of Woody Harrelson, comparatively speaking, to Benicio del Toro. Now, I didn't like Benicio del Toro's appearance in The Last Jedi because I thought it was kind of way too gimmicky, way too, I don't know, I didn't care for it too much. But Woody Harrelson did a really good job of playing the character that he was playing. He's played before, kind of like this, don't trust anybody kind of role. He fits very well. And if you're talking about, guys people wouldn't expect in the movie to come in a Star Wars movie like Woody Harrelson or Benicio del Toro, I think Woody Harrelson, hands down, did a better job.
Yeah, I agree. Benicio del Toro, to me, felt kind of tacked on in The Last Jedi. Yeah. And when he betrayed them, it's like, well, we've seen them together for about 15 or 20 minutes of screen time, maybe. It didn't have much of an impact on me. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, he betrayed him. I don't know anything about the guy.
Right.
But with Woody Harrelson, when he betrays Han, at the end of the movie, we've spent the majority of the movie with Woody Harrelson and Han Solo together, and they don't
father-son relationship. You think?
Yeah, a little bit. They don't go over the top with it because the plot really moves. Like this plot really moves along. But there are some character moments, and Ron Howard does a really effective job of taking a little bit of screen time and building characterization between the different characters. And so I kind of saw it coming that he was gonna betray them. When he walks off, at least when Paul Bettany started talking about it. But it still had an effect. Like, that sucks that he because they had this relationship. So I think that's the difference. Is one movie kind of just like shoved it in there where they could, and the other movie took the time to build up the relationship. So I mean that's why it has an impact to me.
you talk about the characterization. The pilot's name, the pilot who steers him, and then he eventually passes away with the multiple arms. That guy was. I really like that guy,
Yep, me too.
and I wish I wrote down his name. I didn't catch his name, but he did a very good job in the short time he was in there because it was cool to see a different kind of pilot. It wasn't a stereotypical pilot, and he reminded me a little bit of the Rocket Raccoon
Yeah, a little bit.
for Guardians. He had that kind of the same element to it, but a little less of a smart ass. But yeah, I thought he was good too.
Yeah, I did too, and I know he was voiced by Jon Favreau, who's doing who's running the new Star Wars television show that they're going to do on their streaming service. But yeah, I agree. Little things like that, I thought were good. Even Woody Harrelson's girlfriend, and I can't remember her name either.
She was in I think it was Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah, that's right. And she blows herself up, during the heist to, like help them try to succeed. She wasn't in the movie much either, but I still felt for her character, and I felt like I understood her character, very well. So they did a good job in limited space to build up characterization so they could keep the plot, really humming along. It didn't feel, I think the movie was about 2 hours and 15 minutes. It didn't really feel its length to me.
No, yeah, that's a good point, Mark. I felt that the movie went by pretty quickly. I thought and also less Imperial presence made it good. I mean, like I said, we talked about that a little earlier, but I will say at the movie's pace made it feel like the way that not only for quick development, character development, but as you said earlier, sets up for the long run of maybe 2 or 3 possible movies. I think maybe 2. I mean,
Yeah.
This sounds like it's about right around probably around the Clone Wars. It sounds like, or not? Is it? Well, maybe the Clone Wars. You think?
I think it's probably this. I think this probably takes place. If Rogue One takes place basically right before A New Hope, I think this is probably about 5 to 7 years before that. That's kind of the sense that I get. So Darth Vader's out there somewhere already, and
I think the Darth Maul thing threw me off because you're right. Because I'm thinking about when Darth Maul dies, but then I realized, he comes back to life in the cartoons, and they're kind of building that story in there. So yeah, about 5 or 7 years sounds about right.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and that's a really good point. One of the things I appreciated about this movie is that it told its own story, and it wasn't just, hey, look, here's a Star Destroyer. Hey, look, here's TIE fighters. Here's this, here's that, of all these things that you've seen before. It felt somewhat unique while still being, easily part of the universe. We do see a Star Destroyer at one point, and some TIE fighters and stuff like that. There's a walker in the battle. It's hard to see because everything is dark.
That was like you jumped in like that.
Yeah. But there is some of that stuff because it exists in this universe, but it all kind of makes sense in the context of the story and doesn't feel so much like look at me kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like you said, there's a very low Imperial presence. It's kind of always like in the background because it's going to be in the background it's going to be looming in the background of like all these movies that take place while the Empire is still together. But it's a movie about criminals, about the underside of this universe, and so I liked that that was a small. There wasn't much of an Imperial presence, and it was more about these criminals. I think that made it unique. It feels distinct to me from Rogue One or the trilogy sagas too.
Yeah,
So.
And it's something that I think for any Star Wars fan out there who's just a casual fan, maybe you take the wife who doesn't like Star Wars as much, would enjoy this movie. I think that if you are a person who's just getting into Star Wars for the first time, that this is a good one. And honestly, I mean, it's gonna take me a couple. I always wait a couple days. We just saw it in theater, and we just getting an assessment for it. And it takes me a couple days after I process everything what I thought of it. Like for example, like Deadpool 2, I thought was okay, And after I saw it, I'm like, it was alright. But this, I have a better feeling about. I have a better feeling about this. Less, I guess, confusion than Last Jedi. Because The Last Jedi left me with, like, okay, so Leia is Raiden from Mortal Kombat when she flies across the screen. She has superhuman powers. I don't know. And this was more straightforward and left me with less of a weird taste in my mouth. It was refreshing, and honestly, I will praise Ron Howard for keeping it to what Star Wars, I think, before Disney took over, perhaps, like that, it's a movie you can come in, just grab popcorn and enjoy and not think about it. No sub-political plots, no feminism BS. It's just a movie, folks. All this is just a movie. Chill.
One thing that I think is different about this than The Last Jedi, for me, as far as the feeling goes, when The Last Jedi ended, I was kind of like, okay, I don't have a ton of desire to see the next movie.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm sure I will see the next movie, but I wasn't like, oh, I can't wait to see the next movie. At the end of this movie, I thought, I want to see another one of these.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to see what they do with Darth Maul. I want to see how they might link it into the Obi-Wan movie that I know they're going to do. So at this one, I was like, I want to know where this goes from here. And that, getting that feeling is important for, franchises and, building sagas like this. So that was a big difference for me, is that I really want to know what's going to happen from here. And it made me excited about future movies that they might make, with Han Solo.
I think what the Star Wars trilogy has a certain pressure to, and I think The Last Jedi may have, skewed it a little bit, but if these movies are continuing like Rogue One, the offshoots continue to be better than the actual trilogy itself, so be it. I mean, I thought Rogue One was probably one of the best Star Wars movies I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. It was brilliantly shot. Everything was done. And the same thing, the element of adding the everything's not going to be okay aspect of it, getting more grimier and dirtier, is even figuratively and mentally speaking with this movie in terms of, him being a foot soldier and then seeing what the world really is outside of Corellia and not being a slave. I think that's good, and I think that it allows these characters to develop. And then you think about Corellia, and it was in the books they produced a lot of starships, and there's a lot of history to it, and getting just a taste of that a little bit, maybe not doing a deeper dive because I don't think that's necessary, but knowing that history exists out there, and having Lando being this, you see him for what he is. He's just a guy who was just all flash, no substance.
Yep. And I loved how they explain why he calls him Han instead of Han. I mean, a little bit, because or at least they give the origins of it, because he sits down at the table, says his name is Han Solo, and he calls him Han. And he goes, it's Han, but that's okay. It's just because I always thought it was weird, in the original trilogy, he's the only one that says Han instead of Han. And they acknowledged it, so I thought that was kind of fun too. But yeah, overall, I really liked the movie. I think you should all, go out and see it, and enjoy it for yourself. And I think Roger has a good point. You don't have to be a big Star Wars fan to get into this movie. It's a very accessible film, I think.
It really is, and I think for anybody out there who is apprehensive about, it's gonna ruin Star Wars, no, it's fine. It's fine. It was done. The Millennium Falcon also was a big part of it, but again, I thought Ron Howard did a good job of making it just part of the background. Yep.
I think he really focused on the story that he wanted to tell, and how he wanted to tell it, and everything else was, nice window dressing. You know what I mean? Exactly. The Millennium Falcon, all that other stuff was not the main focus of the movie. The characters was the main focus of the movie, and I thought that was great.
I agree.
Well, that's what we thought. Let us know what you think in the comments. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Come back every Tuesday for deleted chapters from famous novels, and every Thursday for dumpster diving. We do these movie videos every once in a while when a big movie comes out. We did it a little more podcast style this time. Let us know what you think about that. And again, please visit Roger and his great team at sportsradiodetroit.com for all your Sports Detroit podcast needs. A big thanks to Roger again for coming in. Thanks to you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.